I'm Jamie Jonkel with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks right here in Missoula, and I deal with Region 2 territories. That's all this country, you know, from Missoula up to Anaconda, Seeley Lake, Lincoln, the Bitterroot, down the Clark Fork, St. Regis. So I'm going to be pretty much talking about just Region 2 territories. You know, I'll try to cover a lot of information here, but feel free to call me or email me whenever you want. You know, if you want more information, if you want me to send you some materials, just write down my number. You can also go to the fwp.mt.gov website and go to Bear Managers, and you can communicate with me there as well. We also have a website right here in Missoula. It's called MissoulaBears.org. We're going to change it to probably 5valleys.org because I'm finding a lot of people from up around Lincoln and Ovando don't want to check out a website that has Missoula's name in there. But we have weekly updates in there on mountain lions and grizzly bear activity and black bear activity just for Region 2 territories. But it kind of is a good site to visit just to see, you know, what bears are doing, what kind of foods they're eating, you know, where there have been some lion activities, you know, who lost a dog, who lost a cat, who lost a llama, who lost a sheep, that kind of stuff. So it's a good site to check out. But feel free to contact me whenever you want. So I'm going to talk mostly about grizzlies, and at the tail end a little bit about mountain lions. With mountain lions, they're pretty much everywhere. Wherever you have deer populations, elk populations, wild turkey, bighorn sheep, you're going to have lions. You know, they're just throughout western Montana. You know, they prefer that country that's more heavily timbered, more rocky terrain, good cover for hunting. What's interesting is we're seeing a lot more lion activity in and around the urban wildlands interface. What it is just there's so many deer, so many elk that are trying to come down into the lower river bottoms to use this habitat that we live in. Humans, you know, have moved into the very best habitats, the river bottom riparian habitats, but boy, we've turned cream into butter or ice cream. With all of our agriculture, all of our lawns, all of our fruit trees, all of our salt licks, all of our heavy irrigation, all of our lawn watering, we've made a virtual wildlife nirvana right where we live. And so we're starting to see all the elk and the deer and the bear and the lion respond to that. You know, why live up in the mountains when you can come down and live like a king next to humans? And so that's why we're seeing so much lion activity anymore in urban areas. But this is a family group of lions, a female with 3 subadults in the Potomac area. And then that great big male, let me see if I can get a different pointer here. This is a great big male just outside of Seeley Lake. And then this is our female Lynn, one of our Northern Continental Divide ecosystem monitoring females. So, you know, bears really have this ability to cover country. And this is a very good example. This is a female grizzly that was captured on the west side of Flathead Lake, not far from Blacktail Mountain. And you can see that she spent a great deal of time on the west side. And Stacy Corville was down here in Polson monitoring a whole bunch of other bears, and at the same time was monitoring Hannah. And one morning, instead of being on the west side of the lake, she was booming in on the east side of the lake. And he was like, she had to have swum. She had to have swam the lake. Well, didn't find out till the collar dropped. It was a GPS collar, but sure enough, you know, after spending all this time on the west side of the lake, she leaped into the lake and went out to Cedar Island, then proceeded to swim across the lake and did a little detour over onto Wild Horse Island. And she spent several days out there on Wild Horse Island. There were several people that saw her, and of course nobody believed them. Turned out it was true. Then she went back to the mainland, and then she swam straight across the lake right past Bird Island and back up into the Missions and into the Swan Valley, where she spent, the rest of the summer. So that's just one female, little subadult female, and you can see the kind of country she covered. So you never know where they're going to show up. And best way to kind of keep them from learning a lot of bad habits and making your life miserable, and this goes for black bears as well, is you just don't have any goodies laying around and available. If you live by a mountain, a river, any kind of wild chunk of country where you got black bear, maybe grizzly, just keep all those attractants contained and you won't have any problems. Garbage, number one issue. I mean, just about everyone I know who lives in the Missoula area or up the Blackfoot, where do they keep their garbage? Outside, alongside the house, or at the end of the driveway. It's just like a big honey pot sitting out there. Bears are can get very, very addicted to any of the grains or bird seeds, pet food. It doesn't seem like much, but bird feeders, each one of those millets, each one of those sunflower seeds, just full of oil and full of fat. And once these bears sort of discover, any of these grains, it's just like heroin, literally. They can't get that taste off the tip of their tongue. Chicken feed, high protein. I mean, it's those grains, those bird seeds, dog food, equine senior, very, very addictive to bears. And once they figure it out, I mean, it's hard to change that behavior. Most of your livestock, cattle especially, don't get preyed on that much by bears. But the two that are the most vulnerable are sheep and chickens. Now, chickens never used to be much of an issue, but now all of a sudden it's become very apropos to be a chicken farmer. And we went from having, a few chicken coops here and there to having thousands of chicken coops and thousands of free-ranging chickens on the landscape. You just look at Missoula here, every 10th home site has a chicken coop and 15 free-ranging chickens running around. And we've been calling them garbage cans with wings, because there's so many chickens on the landscape, it's almost like garbage cans now. They've keyed into it. And it's a tough behavior to change. Irrigation, everything loves wet, everything loves green, especially bears. So they are, they can't pass up an alfalfa field. They can't pass up a green, watered lawn in a subdivision that's full of clover and dandelions. I mean, they crave it, especially in the fall when it's dry as a bone. So just having a green lawn or irrigated pasture is going to suck in all sorts of wildlife, but bears as well. Quickest way to find out if you have grizzlies in your area is to let your dead horse or your cow lay in the back 40 and just rot down. Birds, gulls, ravens, something will inform all these grizzlies in the area to come down and start feeding on that carcass. I've literally had 12 different grizzlies feeding on carcasses that just dropped 2 days before. I'll get the phone call from the landowner. They'll say, boy, I had a horse go down, got bogged down in the mud. Could you come up and pick it up? And I'll scream up there as fast as I can, and there'll already be grizzlies on it. They just key into those carcasses. So, it's very important to, get that horse out well away from the home site. You can bury it, but don't bury it anywhere near the ranch buildings or the residential area. Get it way far away in the back 40. What we find when they're buried, if the bears discover them, they never forget them. And they'll dig that dirt up and eat the dirt. We had a rendering truck tip over in the Gallatin and just spewed tons of grease and bone and meat parts into the soil. They buried it. 10 years, it was nothing but bears getting roadkill, bears coming in, feeding on that greasy dirt. Same with the grain spills up on Highway 2 south of Glacier Park. They buried a lot of that grain. All it did was create a worse problem. So it's better to get that horse or cow out well away from the house, leave it out in the open, let the birds render it down, open it up, or take it to the dump, take it to one of the Montana Department of Transportation compost sites, or if you're down in the Missoula, Blackfoot area, I will come up and help you get that carcass out of there. And then fruit trees. I mean, an apple or a pear or a plum is like $100 bill sitting on a tree for a homeless guy here in town. I mean, the apple this big, compared to a chokecherry or a huckleberry, I mean, only a fool wouldn't try to get that. So, boy, if you've got fruit trees, everything's going to be trying to come into your yard area to get even those little stinky crab apples. I mean, they love them. So just keeping the attractants contained will solve the problems. Yeah.
What time period was that grizzly bear track that was on your map?
That was 2 years. Course of 2 years.
That was over a 2-year period?
Yep. So, here in the northern part of the state, we've been trying to keep track of the grizzly population. It's called the Northern Continental Divide Ecosystem Grizzly Bear Population. It's Glacier Park, Whitefish Range, Bob Marshall, Great Bear, Scapegoat, Rocky Mountain Front, Rattlesnake Wilderness Missions. It's a big chunk of country. And for years, nobody really knew, exactly how many bears there were. And everyone asked you what the population was 10 years ago. It was always about 250 animals. Well, finally, they decided they were going to really get a handle on the population, try to go for delisting. So the ways we keep track of bears right now: trapping, using snares and culverts, putting collars on them. There's a bunch of different kinds of collars. There's the old-fashioned VHF collar that's just like a radio station you tune into. You can keep track of the bear, but it's a lot of driving, a lot of flying, and you're lucky if you can get, 1 point a month to figure out where a bear might be. But they've got some new collars now. They've got GPS collars, where once the collar drops, it's just like the GPS you have on your side. You can plug it into the computer and download 2 or 3 years of point data. Very useful. It's sort of changed everything. If you've got a lot of money, you can even notch up and go to Argos collar, where whenever a satellite kind of goes over, it'll pick up a few points from the bear's collar and download them to a site that you can access on your computer. There's some collars that just every day download, and you can track in real time where a bear is going, but way too expensive. There's some collars too where you can just hit a button on the computer or while you're flying in the airplane, and all that information downloads up to the airplane or to the computer, but so expensive you can't even touch it. So we do most of our stuff with just GPS collars. Cameras are wonderful. Best birthday, Christmas gift on earth. You all deserve at least 2 or 3. So tell your kids that. The best way to figure out what kind of animals are on the property is, get a couple of these cameras and just set them up, and you'll be amazed.
Yeah, our neighbor put up a remote camera, and within a couple of weeks he had seen 7 different individual grizzlies.
Yeah.
And he hadn't seen the mama sow and the 2 cubs that everybody else was talking about. Uh-huh. But it was all off the camera.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Amazing. And it's very useful for us. Sending us these pictures, we can verify where grizzlies are showing up, where wolverines are. I hate to plug one brand, but I myself like those Bushnells. You like Brownings. You go for those higher end ones, like the Reconixes, etc. I can't figure them out. Bushnells, I hit one button real easy. You've got a Bushnell, right? Didn't you get one? Yeah.
What do they
nice and
cost
simple.
About?
You get what you pay for, but $100, $75, up to $300 or $400. Most of the ones we use are mid-range, $250. But with those cameras, you can set them up. We set a lot of them up, and we can verify where there's grizzly activity. This is in the Rattlesnake Wilderness. This is in the middle of the Ovando-Helmville Valley. But what's so nice is there's so many cameras out there in the landscape. I'm getting pictures daily from folks, of lions, fishers, lynx, bobcat, just really cool stuff. Now, DNA, with hair samples. You see a bear run across the highway and you're like, I think that was a grizzly. And you see where he's bound through the barbed wire and the barbed wire is singing away. Run over there and get a hair sample for me and send it to me. I'll ship it in and we'll see if it's a grizzly or a black bear. Just with DNA, we can track individual bears through time just from hair sampling.
Do you ever chip them?
What's that?
Do you ever chip bears?
Yeah, every time we catch one, we usually put an ear tag in their ear, and then we put an avid chip behind their ear, a lip tattoo, all sorts of nasty things. Take a lot of hair samples.
Does that help though for tracking?
Well, again, if you had a lot of money, you could probably come up with some sort of device where you could, figure out the ID of a bear from its chip, but we don't have that ability quite yet. Yeah.
You mentioned putting ear tags in. Last summer I saw this big old black bear down in Potomac on my place, and he had a big yellow tag in his one ear. The Fish and Game told me he's probably a bad bear and been caught.
Not necessarily. There's so many people out there trapping. There's guys doing wolf trapping. Well, they catch a black bear in the wolf trap, they slap an ear tag on it. You got research trappers. So no, that's kind of like a myth.
This was a Forest Service that told me.
Well, they don't know anything.
Oh.
A yellow one, though, tells me that is probably, we use pretty much just green right now and white. If you've got a yellow tag, I do know the Flathead Indian Reservation is using yellow and has been using yellow for a couple of years now. Each area kind of uses a different color, but we got a lot of bears that have been orphaned, rehabbed, and then released, out of that hell in a rehab center. So there's a lot of ear tag bears out there. They've just been incidental captures. So, the area I'm going to talk about is pretty much these Region 2 territories. And in the bulk of the grizzly activity, the bulk of the bears that I work on are up in that, upper Clearwater and upper Blackfoot. And just over the years, this is how we used to keep track of bears with those old VHF collars. You'd fly, you'd drive, and you'd get as many point locations as you could, and by the end of the summer you'd have 10 locations on this bear, and you'd be like, oh, wonderful data, and you'd draw a polygon. Well, now that we're putting on GPS collars, like this bear right here wore a collar, 1,199 points, so you get a lot more information from these GPS collars, and this is just 8 bears from that Blackfoot country. But since 1998, we've had plus or minus 40 management actions, where we've set traps for various grizzly incidents. We've captured about 26 research bears. We've had 38 mortalities that we've been able to prove. A lot of those are cubs of the year that just didn't make it. Big male killed them, or they got road killed, or coyote got them. But a lot of them are man-caused. We're guessing that we have plus or minus 60 individual bears just in that Blackfoot Clearwater country, and we're seeing, the population is very slowly increasing, and we're seeing bears darting south, east, and west, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So this just gives you a kind of an idea. These are point data for the Blackfoot, the Seeley Lake area, the Swan Valley, and the Mission Face. These are just a handful of bears that had GPS collars. So you can see they really smatter across all that habitat, and they really cover a lot of ground. And we've had very good luck down there on the south end. We have very good community networks in place. A lot of good communication through groups like the Blackfoot Challenge, the Clearwater Resource Council, the 9 Mile Wildlife Working Group, Missoula Bears. So we've got a pretty good handle on the education and conflict mitigation. And so our conflicts for about 5-6 years now have been pretty low. This last year we only had I think it was 18 incidents involving grizzlies. And 11 of them were residential, ranging from bird feeders to people feeding deer, corn, deer blocks, and bears coming in. We had one or two incidents where bears came up on porches for dog food, broke into a grain silo, that kind of thing. So it's the residential attractants that are the driving force for most of our conflicts. Now, this summer we did have 4 depredations. We had a place with a chicken coop, free-ranging chickens, lost 14 birds. We got an electric fence around it that night, and bear got shocked, and the landowner was actually able to thump it with a rubber bullet too, and the bear moved on, didn't come back. We did have a lamb killed up by Lincoln. Wildlife Services came in, set snares, didn't capture a bear. We did have a heifer, a fairly big, large-sized heifer that was definitely preyed on by a large adult male grizzly, and Wildlife Services came in and set snares and captured 2 grizzlies. We had the snares set for so long it was hard to tell who was who because there were so many grizzlies coming into the carcass. But there was one big adult male that we felt was responsible, and so he got relocated to the north end of the ecosystem. If he shows up and does another depredation, he'll be removed from the population.
When you say snare, what is a
leg hold foot snare? It's called an Aldrich foot snare. I should have brought one. It's just, instead of going into a culvert trap, door coming down, it's a cable snare that catches them around the rear or the front foot, and it's attached solidly to a tree. Pretty good method of capturing bears. We had a bee yard hit, but it was because the energizer had stopped functioning. We had one of our Montana Department of Transportation compost sites where we take all the elk and the roadkill deer and the roadkill moose and then the cattle and the horses all go to this compost site. Well, the energizer quit working on the electric fence around the compost site. So we did have a grizzly sneak in there, but all I ended up doing was fixing the fence, and bear moved on. We only had 2 encounters. We had a hunter that was behind his place, all of a sudden was bluff charged, by a female grizzly with 2 yearlings about 15 feet away. Needless to say, he got the heck out of there fast. He'd stumbled onto a deer that someone had gut shot, and she piled up there, and this bear had cached it and was feeding on it. We had a couple incidents with bears in apple trees, but that's kind of our average, here on the south end. It's about 16 to 20 conflicts. Now, like I said, I've been working for years with some of the communities up in the Blackfoot Valley, and the Blackfoot Challenge and the Clearwater Resource Council both have websites, and I work hand in hand with both those watershed work groups, and it's amazing the number of electric fences that we've got placed on the landscape. Got a carcass pickup program for all the ranchers up there. We've got most of the bee yards fenced. We got most of the sheep bedding grounds fenced. We got most of the dumps fenced. Lots of communication, lots of organization, and as a result, our bear issues, our conflicts have really gone down. We've been able to keep a handle on them. The only one that's given me grief is last 8 years or so, we've had so many different grizzlies key into the agricultural crops, the alfalfa, the hay barley. Hay barley and some of these sweet mixes for baling, for winter feed have just sort of started up in that Potomac, Ovando, Helmville area. And when you drive by these hay barley fields, you could smell the sugar in the air. They're just so lush. And as a result, we're getting a lot of elk, a lot of deer addicted to this wonderful forage. And, we're getting a lot of bears that are just coming down in the spring, going to those alfalfa fields and just grazing on what's left from last the following season's third cut. And they don't leave the valley floor until the snow falls. They're staying down, eating in these alfalfa fields all summer. And it's become quite an issue. So, you know, we're trying to figure out how to wrap our heads around that one. Got any ideas, let me know. You know, things work so well in that Blackfoot area that we're trying to take the same approach down into that Deer Lodge Valley, the Drummond area. Granite Headwaters and the Granite County Conservation District been working hand in hand with us and the community and got some pretty good stuff going on. We're ahead of the Grizzlies showing up, but the more we can get on the ground, you know, to deal with the skunk and coon and black bear and wolf and coyote issues, you know, the better. You know, we won't have these issues with bears later. So we've got a carcass pickup program going on down there that starts in February and ends in May, where we've got a fella driving around picking up all the sheep, the horses, the cows that died during calving or winter kill or whatever, and they're getting to a compost site right there in Drummond. The rest of the summer, if someone's got a horse in their backyard and they're worried the wolves or bears will key into it, they give me a call, I'll come down and pick it up.
So if they're eating the carcasses, does that then lead to depredation on live animals?
No, it's kind of like having a bar in your neighborhood. It's like, you know, everyone starts coming to the bar
Sure.
and then feeling real comfortable in your neighborhood, and then the next thing you know, they're opening up your car door and taking your CDs, that kind of thing. It's sort of like if you have a boneyard or a dead pit near the ranch, you know, pretty quick you'll have every bear in the country, every coyote in the country coming right to your ranch and hanging out on a ranch, you know. And while a big male comes in, you know, what's the female and the two little sub-adults do? They go off and day bed near the ranch house. They discover the green grass on the lawn, the bird feeders, the grain shed. So boy, that's sort of how it works. They don't necessarily develop a taste for beef or anything like that. Carcass is a carcass. Roadkill, same thing. I mean, if you've got a roadkill, big crossing by your house, and every week you got a dead deer there, I mean, you're going to have bears keying into your house because of that roadkill site. So lots of good partnerships, and that's what makes everything work well. Yeah.
I see you have bear-proof garbage cans in the Granite County area.
Yes.
Where are those available to
Yep.
landowners?
Yes, they are. If you work with Granite Disposal or Anaconda Disposal, they've got cans there, and we've been helping them with big grants, rack grants, etc., getting more and more cans. We've got some bear-resistant garbage racks. So the first step is to approach the sanitation company. The next step is, you know, approach me, see if I can help negotiate something. But there are cans available. Here in the Missoula area, I mean, lots of organization. We got that website I told you about. Got little bear aware groups popped up all around the valley. I mean, a bear can hardly go from point A to point B without 4 or 5 people calling me or hopping on the website and reporting, you know, hey, a black bear just came through our backyard, you know, 2 hours ago, and I can keep a real good handle on these bears. Yeah.
Do you have a website for the flathead? Because in our neighborhood, the Grizzlies just go from one orchard to the next, fruit tree to the next one to the next one. They're after the apples and the plums. And, I mean...
Are you on the reservation, or are you on...
No,
okay.
we're up due east of Kalispell, up in the foothills.
Yes.
And up by Mud Lake and...
Tim Manley. Tim Manley is the man to approach. And Tim has taken a different approach. He's got a Facebook page. And I don't want to do Facebook, but Tim, his Facebook page is amazing. So get on his Facebook page and friend him, and you'll find out more than you want to know about grizzlies.
Now, do they cost share on electric fences around some of these?
You betcha.
orchards?
You betcha.
I mean, up there.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about that right now, just since you brought it up. The Defenders of Wildlife has an electric fence incentive program. So let's say you have a coop or you have some apples, you just have no means of containing your garbage. You can approach the Defenders of Wildlife. You can hop on this MissoulaBears.org website and do a quick search for electric fence. And for about 3 years now, they've been able to raise quite a bit of money. And you can get up to $500 on a cost share. And $500 will buy you a really good energizer, a lot of posts, and some good wire. So you can whip out a really nice electric fence system around your little orchard, around your chicken coop. So just Google that up, Defenders of Wildlife Electric Fence Incentive Program. You can tap into that. You can also, if you're a professional beekeeper, you can tap into the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Bee Bears program. Bees and Bears program. And then if worse comes to worse, I can check you out an electric fence kit. I've got probably 25, 30 kits, and I check them out continually all summer. So lots of options there. But in Missoula, just very highly organized. Yeah.
We encourage the neighbors only to put their garbage cans out that one night before the truck comes around. And we found full strength ammonia, just a few ounces, will work wonders. We've never had a problem since.
Yeah, the big thing, most of the places that I deal with that have continual problems, down at the end of the driveway where there's 5 neighbors, there's 5 garbage cans out all week, and every day they drop these nasty kitchen wet slop, and it's just like a big feeding ground. Not only is it where they have all their garbage cans, it's also where the bus stop is, It seems like most bus stops around the Missoula Valley here are right at these prime wildlife crossing areas where every mountain lion on earth crosses right there just because of the way all the ridges come together. It's also where they store all their garbage, so it's one of those issues. It's pretty simple but also complicated and hard to deal with. Yeah.
Is there a trend here? 20, 25 years ago in the missions, you had to get into the Jewel Basin to see a grizzly. And it was virtually unheard of on either side. Has that changed? Have they left the high country? They're down on the alfalfa fields and garbage cans now?
Well, there's a lot of theories and philosophies out there, but in the old days there was a lot more wild country. There was little jeep roads going up into the middle of these rugged mountain areas and tons of dark wilderness everywhere. Now it's sort of interlaced with a lot of roads, a lot of clear cuts, a lot more people. And this is my theory, is that wildlife have just sort of figured it out, that where there's people and where people live, there's some pretty wonderful food and the enhancement of the habitat. They already always want to be down in the riparian areas, but like I said, we've turned milk into butter by creating all these wonderful food sources down here.
I think that the deer feel safer close in, because they seem to want to hang around the house even though we don't have anything out.
Yes.
We don't have a fancy yard or anything.
There's some of that. They feel safer from predators, they feel safer from hunters, but it's easy living. If you are a deer and you decide to live in the rattlesnake and graze on clover and wet lawns all year, and crab apples and carraganda, and you're going to get fat. You're going to get big.
Not on our yard.
Your cubs, or your fawns. The reproduction in our urban deer is so much better than our mountain deer. It's unbelievably rich food sources down here where we live.
James, there was fresh deer tracks right outside the building here this morning.
Yeah.
2 or 3,
Yeah. So we're just getting more and more city deer, more and more city lions, more and more. It's just the wave of the future, sadly. Why be an elk up on some windswept ridge when you can come down and graze in a golf course? Yeah.
Do you find that poultry fence depicted on the screen is sufficient, or do you need more backup with bears? Because I've had something like that by my house.
The hot ground mesh fences are much, much better than the all hot. All hot ones seem to ground out, but if it's alternating, they're pretty darned effective. Like if you just want to have a quick little free ranging area, where nothing you do about the owls and the eagles, but it'll keep the coyotes and the foxes and the skunks from getting them and the bears. Yeah, so the mesh fence works pretty good. So now I'm going to talk about where grizzlies are showing up and how we kind of keep track of them. So these are all the reports I get just on the phone. About half of them are unverified, meaning, they could be a black bear, they could be a dog, they could be a grizzly. I have no way of knowing, but I do keep track of all the reports I get from folks about grizzly bears. So, a good portion of them up here are definitely grizzly because the folks that live in that area see grizzlies daily. They're used to seeing grizzlies and can tell the difference. You get down here in the Bitterroot, and elsewhere, I get a lot of calls and even get pictures sent to me, and I'm like, well, sorry, that's not a grizzly, that's a black bear. But I keep track of them all, but you can see that there's a definite trend. They're slowly creeping south. So this here are all the verified grizzly bear reports that we've received. So they're not all the reports I've received, but they're the ones that I've been able to verify with a photograph, a video, or I see them personally, or a biologist or game warden documents it. So you can see that this is, showing that they're definitely, going out there on the Rocky Mountain front, they're definitely creeping south, and they're definitely creeping west. This map over here is...
Each one of those squares, a bear sighted?
Exactly, yes. This is an occupancy model based on all of the radio-collared bears out there over time. And they've kind of taken all of that information and looked at all the home ranges where bears are continually sort of spotted. And they've come up with that distribution map to where, you can be ensured that there's going to be resident males and females. So you can see, here's Great Falls, here's Helena, here's Butte, here's Missoula. Now, like I said, I get lots and lots of photographs sent in. And it's really helped me a great deal figuring out where these grizzlies are showing up. This is one of my favorites. This is a guy over near Deer Lodge that was hunting just over the top in the boulders, and he's waiting for a black bear to show up on this elk that someone had gutted out and left alongside the road. And here comes this bear, and he's like, whew, that's a grizzly. He holds his scope on his rifle up, anchored on this mirror of his window, and he gets his cell phone, and it takes a couple of pictures. And he sent that to me, and I'm like, oh, thank you. Yes, verified grizzly bear. This is another one over there in that Deer Lodge Valley area on the Boulder Divide. It's a wolverine hair trap. They set up a camera hoping to get a picture of a wolverine, rubbing the scent and leaving some hair samples on all these barbs. Instead, got a picture of a grizzly. And this is early March when this bear first emerged out of its den. So darn well it's a bear that's denned. This is over in the Helena area. One of the Wildlife Services guys was flying over that Wolf Creek, Lions Creek country, looking for a couple of coyotes to shoot. Great big old male up on the ridge. This is grizzly in Avon, Georgetown Lake, Avon, Deer Lodge, Avon area, Deer Lodge Valley, Avon area. So it's allowed me to kind of verify that grizzlies are showing up in these areas. Now, I get a lot of these, I got a grizzly in my backyard. This is one up on Evero Hill. Well, has all the right colors, but not the right body features, just a blonde phase black bear. And then these are always my favorite. It's got a hump. Well, the hump's back there a little far, It's got a hump. Well, in the middle of the back. It's got a hump in the middle of the back. Those are bears that have probably been shot, clipped on the spine, or hit by a car, and healed up. This is just a big old fat male with a big butt. And again, here a nice blonde face, black bear. So, yeah.
Can they interbreed at all? Or
No.
are they totally different species?
Totally different species. Polar bears and brown bears or grizzlies are very, very close, and they can interbreed. You know, they have interbred black bear and grizzlies in zoo situations, but they're sterile, you know, like a mule, you know. So, yeah, in the wild they don't. So again, you know, these are always my favorite. The picture through the spotting scope, you know, can definitely tell, you know, female with cubs, and she even has a collar. Here's one, you know, from the Flint Range, you know, down there outside of Anaconda, you know. I'm like, oh, that looks like a grizzly. You know, it's up there in a nice alpine basin, you know. You've got a bear that looks like it's silver-tipped, blonde, got 2 cubs with it, you know. Pretty sure it's a grizzly, but I wasn't able to verify it because I just couldn't, you know, you tried to bring it up and you're like, well, it's just a big blob of brown now, you know. So probably a grizzly, but who knows. Another way I can get a good handle on where bears are showing up is just by sign. And, you know, if you're out there hunting and you find a beautiful bite tree, you know, and you're, you know, some area where, you know, we know there's no grizzlies, and you're like, boy, these hairs look silver tipped to me. I can see the root follicle and I can see these big old silver tips. I think this is a grizzly. You know, collect those hair samples, look at my address and send them to me, and I'll send them in, and we'll find out if it's a black or a grizz. You know, like I say, you see a bear running through a fence after it crossed Interstate 90. Stop. You know, go over, check out that barbed wire fence, see if there's a big old tuft of hair there, and if it looks silver tipped and you were pretty sure it was a grizzly, collect that hair and get it to me. You know, bears will dig, bears will cache, mountain lions will cache. When grizzlies dig and when grizzlies cache, I mean, they dig. It's like a little D4 cat or something. I mean, those claws they have, those are for digging. And this was up the 9 Mile. They buried a horse, and the next day it was unburied. And the bear had dug right down 5 feet into this hard packed soil that had been tamped solid with the bucket of the backhoe. Grizzly. You can see the actual grizzly claw marks from those long front claws in here, you know, and just nothing can do that but a grizzly. A black bear can't do that overnight. This is a grizzly cache. You know, you'll find an elk or you'll find a deer that's been cached by a mountain lion, you know, pretty dainty, looks like they were burying their feces in a cat litter box, you know. Black bear will once in a while do a little caching, but when grizzlies cache, I mean, they move dirt and they turn it into a big mud pie pancake, and they usually bed right on top of it. And so even when you find a cache that's 5 years old and all the meat's gone and just dry bones, you can still distinctively tell that it was a grizzly cache. Very distinctive. And then they spend thousands of hours up on these ridge lines, churning up the ridges, digging up biscuit root. And it looks like you went down a ridge with a rototiller. And if you see that kind of digging activity and partial tracks and scats, you know darn well it's grizzly that's doing that. It's not black bear. And then tracks. I mean, grizzly bear front track is very, very square, and quite often they'll have those claws as long as your fingers. Grizzlies could type. That's how long their claws are. And they use those claws just like we use our fingers. You know, black bears curved, not that long, but the big thing is the squareness of the front foot. Black bear tracks are just really rounded, and you can do this straight edge test. When you run that ruler across the ridge there, all the toes are above that straight edge. If you've got a black bear, that little toe is usually well under that straight edge. It's just a rounder track. So if you find a set of bear tracks, don't take a picture of the hind track and send it to me, because there's nothing I can do with that. I've had people take pictures, you know, it's a definite grizzly, and when they send it to me, it's a hind track, and I'm like, oh, I can't do anything with it. I need that front track to verify. But
Are the
yeah,
hind tracks basically the same?
they are, and there'll people that'll argue, you know, that's more pounded, rounded and pointed, you know, on a grizzly, but you just can't get a good feeling for it without that front track. you can have a huge black bear track, bigger than any of the other grizzlies in the area, and people will think it's a grizzly just because it's big. We got plenty of little tiny grizzlies out there, and it's that squareness of the front foot that allows us to tell the difference. So here's a big male. This was just outside of, in the Rock Creek area, just outside of Phillipsburg. Great big square front print. Another, this is down in the boulders, square, This was dirt road down by Ontario Creek, that Telegraph Creek country, down by Avon, Elliston. So getting tracks and getting good pictures really helps.
The picture you had on the lower right, is that a hind foot?
Yes.
Foot?
So here's the hind foot, and you can see the pad, the toes, how square this is, and then here's the claw marks way out front. You can't always go by those claws because they dig. And a bear in August or October, that's been in the high country doing a lot of digging, no claws. I mean, they wear them down to nothing. A lot of your lowland grizzlies, the ones living in the Swan Valley or up in the Blackfoot, I mean, they don't do a lot of digging, so they'll have nice long claws all summer and right into the fall. But you get one of these mountain grizzlies that lives up on some rocky ridge, I mean, they'll be worn down to nothing. So one of the best ways to verify is by having a dead bear. And so here's some bears that showed up dead. This was a male that was on display at the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks office for many years. He was shot by a black bear hunter right down there at Garrison Junction in 1980. And then this was a grizzly that showed up just outside of Anaconda. Someone was walking their dog, found it dead, arrow. Someone had stuck it thinking it was probably a black bear. And when they went to go retrieve the body, realized it was a grizzly and let it lay. And that was in 2005. And then 2010 at Elk Park, just right outside of Butte, big commotion outside, the ducks and the chickens squawking, and landowner went outside and shot over the bear's back. It's always amazing to us how many bears that get shot over always end up having a bullet right between the eyes. But when he went out there the next day, it was a grizzly, not a black bear. When we have these depredations, we work with an agency, Wildlife Services, nicknames the gopher chokers, APHIS. When you have livestock-related conflicts, like where a calf is killed, a lamb is killed, a bee yard is hit, chickens are killed, that's the agency responsible for dealing with the situation. We help, but we aren't the folks in charge. They are. And so a few years ago, they had a bee yard hit right outside of Drummond. And
The interstate, wasn't it?
yeah, not far from the interstate. And so they set some snares, thinking it was for black bears. And the next day, the snare was gone, the drag was gone, and they tracked it to a barbed wire fence not far from the interstate, where this young 2-year-old grizzly had finally got all tangled up in the wire. And so we were able to dart him, put a collar on him, and moved him north. Everyone that I talked to that had seen the bears earlier said it was traveling with a much larger bear. So we think it was a female with a subadult. And they were working all that kind of Willow Creek, Drummond area along those river bottoms, but did hit that bee yard. So we moved him north. Here's where we caught him. I moved him up north, dropped him off in the upper Blackfoot, thinking he'd make a beeline straight back. We put a GPS collar on him, but by golly, he just stayed right in that Blackfoot Valley until he dropped his collar. So now that he's dropped his collar, we don't know if he's alive, if he's moved south. We don't know where he went, but he never came back, and he wore that collar for a year. He never went back. Right outside of Deer Lodge. I mean, if you've been to the Deer Lodge Fair, I mean, you look across the interstate and you'll see a patch of cottonwood. That's where we caught that grizzly. Again, a bee yard. It was electrified, not the best design. Wildlife Services was called. They sat on the beehives. Was just going to shoot the black bear when it came in, and what came out of the woods but a grizzly. And so they called us, they set some traps and ended up catching this fellow, the Coughlin subadult. Turned out he was a bear that we'd trapped the year before up in that Ovando Hillsville area. He had grown quite a bit. Sadly, I was using a new drug mixture and I lost this guy. So he didn't make it. But when we first caught him up here in the Helmsville area, you know, we just had an ear transmitter on him because he only weighed about 125 pounds. We got a signal kind of north of Ovando. Then he showed up in Lincoln. Bird feeder. I hate bird feeders. There are about 25 grandmas in the Missoula area that will shoot me on sight because I'm always after them about their bird feeders. But I mean, it's okay to have a bird feeder, you know, and feed a couple birds. You know, I'd rather see the bird feeder off well away from the house because bird feeders are visual and they teach bears to come to houses. Once they get addicted to bird seed, you know, they start looking for bird feeders, and you'll get them going from house to house looking for bird feeders. And I've been to places where there are 75 to 80 bird feeders swinging, where porches are covered with millet and sunflower seeds, where there's flower pots everywhere filled with bird seed. You know, there's enough bird seed in there to feed China. You know, so these bears were definitely addicted to bird seed, and Lincoln is the bird feeder capital. But you can see he's got his little ear transmitter here. Here he's going for bird feeder. Here he was in a yard where there were at least 30 bird feeders. So he was definitely a bird feeder bear. And his brother, pretty sure that was his sibling, got road killed right at the Lincoln airport. And then he showed up in Deer Lodge the next year. We had a verified grizzly depredation in the Avon area. Wildlife Services tried to catch the bear, but they weren't able to. But he had definitely preyed on a calf. And then in the lower Clark Fork, and I mean lower Clark Fork, right here at Turah, we had a grizzly that was kind of working all that country from Rock Creek down to Turah and Bearmouth, and was seen continually. I had guys shooting ground squirrels where all of a sudden this grizzly comes down off the hillside and starts taking the ground squirrels that they'd shot, you know, and feeding, and then waiting for them to shoot another one and then run over, you know. So he was quite a character. He ended up just outside of Clinton. This guy photographed him, and he saw the bear going over to the neighbor's house, so he rushed over there to warn the neighbor. Well, the neighbor had quite a feeding program going, had 2 tons of corn in their garage, and they had corn piles and buckets of apples and stuff all over their property. And I'd hunted that country a little bit, and I always wondered why there were all these big, massive elk trails and game trails coming down to the river there, and I was like, boy, there must be a salt lick or something there. Well, she'd been feeding for years and years and years, so she got her corn confiscated, but she fed enough where she sucked in a grizzly in an area where there aren't very many grizzlies. You know, in that Rock Creek, Phillipsburg country, 2002, I started getting all these calls from people that saw this grizzly feeding on a carcass on the Rock Creek Road by the Hog's Back. And I was like, yeah, probably a black bear. And then finally, you know, one of my interns went up there and called me back and said, no, it's a grizzly. So we went up there, and some tribal members had shot 2 moose, a bull and a cow, and left the guts and the heads, and this little grizzly was feeding on it. And so we pushed the grizzly off, removed the carcasses. We didn't get a caller on this bear, but we're able to keep track of it just from all the phone calls. The very next day after we moved those carcasses, a grizzly showed up over here on the Bitterroots on the Stevensville side, and I was able to track down this nice dusty dirt road all the way down to the East Side Highway. And that bear crossed the highway, the East Side Highway, and went into the Bitterroot bottoms just upstream from Stevensville. I'm like going, okay, this is going to be interesting. But he moved back and was seen routinely, you know, the rest of the year over in this Willow Creek country. Since then, we've had some pretty good verified reports of tracks and such. So we've definitely got grizzlies down that Rock Creek country, that Sapphire Range. And then the Boulder Range, you know, all that stuff south of Elliston and Avon, you know, just routinely getting lots and lots of good pictures of tracks, visuals, all the way down into that Butte country. So here's a collared bear. He was trapped up here by Stacy Corville, the tribal bear manager, and threw a collar on him. It was a GPS collar. And every time Stacy flew or looked for him or listened for him, where was he? Right here in the Missions. Real boring bear. Never moved, always the same place. Well, when the collar finally dropped, he had made some pretty impressive travels. He'd come all the way down through the Missions, through the Potomac Valley, into the Clark Fork Face, the Ryan Creek country, spent all of May and June in here. You know, a big adult male, why would he be down there? Probably a girlfriend. And he spent some time up here on the Paws Up and in the Blackfoot and then buzzed back up. So Stacy Corville had only gotten a hold of him 3 or 4 times by signal, and it was always up here just outside of St. Ignatius and Ronan. But we were astounded then when we got to see where he traveled. So that's why these GPS collars are so nice. This was an unusual bear. It was caught up in the Swan Valley, just outside of Swan Lake, that only had a VHF collar on, but he was like a big dog, real tame. When he was caught, it was in this old gal's backyard. No bird feeders or anything, but grazing on green grass. Trapped him, and the sister relocated him to the South Fork. The sister came right back. She was shot and killed. He went on a little walkabout. And when I say walkabout, he liked to walk railroads and he liked to walk highway medians. And he just headed south, went on a nice little hike, pretty much staying on log roads and highways and railroad beds, and he was seen continually. But, you know, he went all the way through this Sealy, Blackfoot, down here into the Garrison Junction area. He even went down by Deer Lodge, Avon, Marysville, Lincoln, and then ended back up in Sealy. So these were just the pictures I got from the public of him as he was traveling through. And I was able to get a few signals and a few flights, but, you know, he was spent a lot of time just right outside of Avon there, grazing along the railroad tracks. And finally, you know, he was just to the point where we'd be sitting here in a backyard at a picnic, and he would come into the backyard and start grazing on grass right next to us and the kids and the bird feeders. He never got into garbage or bird feeders, but he loved green grass and felt real comfortable around people. So we finally trapped him and took him to the Washington State University Bear Lab. In that Helena country, starting to see grizzlies showing up in there. You know, we had a grizzly get into a chicken coop at Wolf Creek. We had a calf depredation at Canyon Creek. We had a gal just outside of Helena at Birdseye gave me a call and said, I just had 2 bears go through my yard, and I think they're grizzlies, and they climbed right over my duck pen and kept going. Didn't do anything, but I think they were grizzlies. And I was like, well, send me a hair sample. Well, she did, and I thought, well, probably black bear. Came back as a known grizzly from Shoto. So he did a little walkabout down there. His name is Zimmer. But we're starting to get more and more bear sightings all through that country. The Missoula area, we had one mortality. Up there at Kelly Creek, just off of Lolo Pass, black bear hunter sitting over a bait in Idaho, shot a bear he thought was a black bear, and when the outfitter went in there to go skin it out, he had a little surprise. It was a young adult male grizzly. The DNA showed that he'd come from the Selkirks over in Idaho. He didn't come from this Blackfoot country. He came out of Selkirks. Yeah.
Down at Yellowstone Park, they've got this big display of like 15, 20 bears, and it says grizzly or black.
Uh-huh.
And you go through and you guess,
Uh-huh.
and you're wrong every time, even though you see a lump or, you know, a hump.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't believe it. I thought I knew the difference, and that display is amazing.
It is. It is. We have one out at our office, and this is sort of a little pretend one here. They try to trick you.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do.
And, you know, when you get used to seeing grizzlies, I mean, you just know. I mean, once you kind of figured out, I mean, there's just no mistaking him. That hump and the claws, I mean, they just look different. But it can be tough. Like this is a summer grizzly, he was like he had a buzz cut. The hair was only like a quarter of an inch, just a buzz cut. But this is in the 9 Mile. This is a grizzly that showed up just after the big fires there, hit all the mushroom camps. The mushroom folks went in there to pick morels and just sloppy camps everywhere, and he got started up on some of those sloppy camps and then became a holy terror for the community in 9 Mile with ducks, chickens, and garbage. And we finally had to take him out of the population. But that 9 Mile country, getting continual grizzly sightings in there. And just over the top of the hill, over on the reservation side, the Arlee side, Stacy Corville, all summer last year, busy as a little bee, dealing with 2 or 3 different family groups of grizzlies, just right over the top of the hill from Missoula. So we're going to see more and more activity there. This was a female with cubs. This was a lone adult male that was observed hunting elk calves, very successful at it. Another one of Stacy Corville's bears, Laval, when they downloaded her collar, by golly, they found out that she'd used the underpass up there at Mule Palace and did a little foray right down into the Missoula Valley and looked at Missoula and then went back up into the Rattlesnake. And she was sort of the first recorded radio collar grizzly that came down and visited the Missoula Valley. And they're pretty sure that she used that overpass. We also caught a little grizzly 8-ball up in the head of Gold Creek, just outside of Missoula here. And when we downloaded his collar, and we could see he spent some time, in the Rattlesnake, but a lot of time over here in Belmont and Gold Creek, and then way up here around Ronan as well. So now Stacy Corville also deals with wolf issues, and he was working a couple wolf depredations in that Arlee area. And how'd you like to catch him in a wolf trap? You can see the wolf trap right here. It was staked and the bear didn't pull it. He was able to drive up next to it and dart it. But this was a great big adult male. He slapped a collar on it, but he didn't wear the collar for very long. And then this is over in Valley Creek, He-Wolf Mountain, just on the 9 Mile divide. Caught another grizzly there, slapped a collar on it, but it dropped. Got a few points. I don't know if you guys have heard of Ethel. Ethel the grizzly bear. She's a grizzly that got trapped up by Big Fork. And they slapped a collar on her, and she was pretty boring. The first couple years she was collared, just kind of hung out there in that Lake Blaine, Big Fork area up in the Missions. And then they caught her a few years later and slapped a GPS collar on her. And she was in Apples with her subadult, and they relocated her over into the South Fork of the Flathead. And boy, oh boy, did she do some traveling. She ended up over on the Rocky Mountain front, came down into the Missoula area and denned just up Wishard Ridge behind the Blackfoot Tavern, left her yearling down here, and then went back up into that glacier country, and then the next fall came back down, spent almost the entire fall right here on the outskirts of Missoula. And while she was there, she was seen by multiple bow hunters, and we actually had a lion kill that we slipped up a camera on, and we got a picture of her, and you can see her collar. She was scavenging that lion kill. But this is Butler, Grant, Laval Creek, Johnson Creek. You can see she just spent a tremendous amount of time here just up from the Y. She actually did a little foray to the Missoula dump. Didn't really get into it, but definitely checked it out. She was right up here on Waterworks Hill. She crossed Grant Creek. She was there almost a month. Then she took off. Next time we found her was in the 9 Mile, and then she kept on going west and ended up in the Coeur d'Alene River up there by McGee Meadows, north of Kellogg. Then her collar went off the air. But here's where she denned in 2013. When her collar came back on, she was south of I-90, south of St. Regis. And I mean, she traveled. She was like, here's this country north of Kellogg, the Coeur d'Alene River. I mean, she was down by Avery, down by Marysville, down by Clarkia. She even, when she came back, she came to that Blue Mountain area, the recreation area, and looked at Missoula from a completely different angle, headed south into the Bitterroot, all the way down to Sweeney and Bass Creek, tried to cross right here about where McClay's ski area is, you know, Squaw Creek. In a way, I wish she'd made it across so we could have seen how she went through that country. But, you know, here's Lolo. She went right through the middle of Lolo in the middle of the night. Nobody saw her. In all of her travels, nobody ever saw her, and she never got into any trouble. But you can see just a tremendous amount of country. This is a female. She's about 25, 24 years old. Didn't have cubs, you know. Went on a walkabout.
Well, were the last tracks up there by Eureka?
Yes, she, so after she was here in Missoula, she buzzed up into the Bob again in the Mission, spent a lot of time on huckleberries, went into the Great Bear, then went up into Glacier, almost by the Canadian border, right when the Hucks were doing great, then went crossed over into that Eureka Valley country, and that's where she dropped her collar. Just, I mean, talk about a traveler.
How old did they get?
Well, you know, the average age of our radio-collared females, our matriarch females, are about 22 a couple years ago. You know, those are all our matriarch females, the ones that, you know, we're monitoring the population with. If a bear can get past 5 or 6 and learn all the ropes of how to avoid people, they can live for quite a while. But 36 is the oldest female that I'm aware of. So, you know, getting bears showing up in a lot of places. Delisting process has sort of begun. 2004, they did that huge DNA study. I mean, they had samples, DNA sample sites all over the whole northern continental divide ecosystem. I mean, they divided the whole area into grids, and they went out and collected hair samples. And they came up with a population of 765 bears for all that country from the Canadian border down to the Blackfoot. They put it into a population model and came up with a population estimate of about 1,000 bears. First time they'd ever had a good estimate. And then the next year they started the Northern Continental Divide Ecosystem Grizzly Bear Monitoring Study. And you know, if you hop on our website, you can look at all the reports and stuff. But basically, you know, it was the first step for evaluating the population, the dynamics, to see if the population was stable, growing, etc.
That did not include Yellowstone.
No,
Okay.
no, just talking about up north here.
Yeah.
So females are the key. You know, we want to keep track of these adult females that are producing young every 4 years, 3 years, and seeing how long they survive and seeing how long the cubs survive. So down here in the Blackfoot, we try to keep about 3 to 4 females collared. You get up there in that whitefish country, the glacier country, you know, you're talking 6, 12 bears, you know. So they're always trying to keep about 40 females collared at all times. And after a lot of work, a lot of analysis, they've come up with the population parameters. So age of first reproduction in these females is about 5. Litter size, 1.97. Birth intervals, 2.5 years. So population of about 1,000. They've plugged that all together and they've come up with a trend where the population is increasing about 3 to 4%. So we think that we have proven that the population is on a very slight increase and that we can start moving toward delisting. Yeah.
What is the gestation period for the bear?
You know, they've got delayed implantation, just like the Mostellas do, so it's a little odd. The breeding season is in May and June, and the egg embeds, but then they can go into this delayed thing, and you know, then it's just pretty neat. You know, if they didn't get enough food, they just reabsorb. So the delisting process was kind of rolling along pretty good. We had to do a conservation strategies first. Everything was rolling along really nice until it came to the hunting part. And then it got kind of ugly, and everything's gotten real quiet, and all I've been told at this point is that it's at a Washington, D.C. level. So who knows what's going to happen. Yeah.
How, or maybe you're gonna cover this on bear spray, how reliable is it?
You know, I think it's great. I use it all the time for, like I got these self-spraying devices set up on a mock bird feeder. I've got them set up on garbage cans where the bears will spray themselves in the face. I've used them on bears that I've encountered, you know, in these management situations, like where they're trying to get around me outside of a garage, and I'll spray them in the face point blank, and it just shuts them down. It's a pretty darn good tool, So I carry it all the time. And I've got cans in my cabin, in my trucks. I've got them everywhere. Where they're nice, it kind of turns you into a skunk. You know, if you've got a can, you know, you can shut down a bear pretty easily on it. You know, what they're finding is that folks that just, you know, use the old pistol or whip out the rifle, shoot them through the guts, knock a lower jaw off, you know, sometimes the level of the and intensity of the attack is pretty nasty, and they get hurt. And sometimes you get lucky and it kills the bear right away, but it seems to, the trend is that this bear spray really seems to shut them down.
How
You
long
know,
does it last?
Yeah.
you know, they've got an expiration date on the can.
No, I mean, if
Oh.
you spray one.
Well, I can vouch for that. I've sprayed myself in the face many, many a time. It's about a half hour of suffering and red eye, and then,
Keeps the bear down for half.
oh, I mean, you spray them in the face and they're just like, oh, you know, rolling on the ground, clawing at their eyes, you know, blundering, rolling, you know, just lose complete interest in you.
How far
Yeah.
away can you?
You know, there's a lot of debate, but from you to me is when you should start using it. I tell people it's for hand-to-hand combat. Because the last thing I want to do is waste a can on some bear that's 40 yards away. I want to keep mine until I know I need it. But it's good stuff. Good stuff.
Now, I've heard that after you spray it once, it ruins the gasket and you have to get another bottle.
No, you know, sometimes what will happen is it'll plug up the nozzle. You might have to clean it with a little alcohol. But every time you spray it, you know, it gets less and less and less. So a lot of people I know keep testing it. But I've had good luck. I've got some cans. I've got the first can I was ever given in 1979. And it's just the old white label with nothing on it, you know, number 5, and it still sprays. I mean, so, you know, your rights. A lot of people want to know what their rights are. So the grizzly is protected under the Endangered and Threatened Species Act. So if the bear is in the act of attacking or killing livestock or a person, you know, no problem with self-defense. But when it comes to livestock, you know, black bears, mountain lions, coyotes, wolves, if they're out there amongst the livestock, you know, and even thinking about killing a chicken, you know, you can dump them. With grizzlies, you can't do that. You know, if a grizzly's in your backyard walking across the yard, you can't dump it. If he's looking at your chicken but isn't chasing your chicken, you can't dump him. But if he's in the act of like depredating on your livestock, that's when you can kill a grizzly. It's pretty sticky. Lots of cases out there. Because they're protected under the Endangered and Threatened Species Act, you know, they try to get folks to call either wildlife services or call Fish, Wildlife, and Parks so we can come in and figure out what the heck is going on, why this bear is showing this kind of behavior. Usually boils down to a lot of attractants. I'd say 90% of the places I go to, you know, there's something there that's a huge draw. A dead cow, a dead sheep, a small orchard with rotting apples all around the outside of the house, a truckload of garbage, that kind of thing. So I think that pretty much covers that. So real quick, how are we doing on time? Let me check. 10:18. So not too bad. So I'll try to cover mountain lions now. They're everywhere. In western Montana, like I said, if you've got deer, you've got elk, you've got wild turkeys, you've got Columbia ground squirrels, I mean, there are lions there hunting them. Now, they don't like real open terrain, sagebrush, big grassland country. They like country with cover. So if you live in an area like the Swan Valley, lots of timber, lots of blowdown, lots of little saplings, great cover, lots of benches, lots of riparian areas, you've got some excellent prime mountain lion habitat. You live in an area that's real rocky, craggy, where you've got bighorn sheep and mule deer, and lots of ledges, you've got good mountain lion habitat. Our new mountain lion habitat is kind of like that one I was talking to you about before, the urban wildlife, the urban wildlands interface. We've created a pretty good hunting environment, like in Missoula's South Hills. You've got a great big grassland dry face with a lot of deer that is now covered with thousands of houses and thousands of backyards and hundreds of boat trailers and hundreds of fences and hundreds of caraganda hedges and hundreds of sheds and shacks where you've created a pretty good area to do some sneaking. So, that's the third kind of mountain lion habitat we have. And, we're sure seeing a big change here in the Missoula area. Just because of all the deer, all the elk, we're starting to see more and more lions. And the old myth about lions never being seen, being secretive, that's no longer. I mean, they'll be walking right down the middle of a street in the rattlesnake, middle of the day, perfectly content, paying attention to the deer, but it sure makes the community nervous, and it sure makes us nervous. And so we've got that website I told you about, MissoulaBears.org. We keep tabs on all those lion sightings, and we don't have much tolerance for any lion that sets up shop in town. A lion trying to get from Mount Jumbo over to Waterworks Hill, he has to go through humans. A lion trying to get from Miller Creek over to the river has to go through humans. So we cut them a little slack there. But the minute they start setting up shop and hunting house cats and hunting deer in town, sadly, we remove them. So, this lion that I get calls on, these cats that are like up on your porch, they're really interested in house cats, and I think it's mostly because of the urine, What do mountain lions do? Same thing that big toms do, house cats, is they spray on everything and mark their territory. So if you've got a bunch of house cats, you've automatically got a little bit of a lure, where a lion is going to go, that little pesky thing's been pissing all over here. I'm going to go in there and scrape on top of all of his marking sites, and I'm going to get him if I get the chance. And then there's so many wild cats, At night when I'm doing these spotlight surveys, the most common set of eyes I see out there, and I mean in some of these real wild areas, are house cats. Feral house cats, they're everywhere. So they've almost become like a prey base. So cats really key into house cats. Lions key into house cats. But, they also key into the deer that are in the backyard. So, you've got a remote house up on a ridgeline in a ponderosa forest with a bunch of pine grass all around you. But in your backyard, you have some nice crested bluegrass, Kentucky blue with dandelions, and the sprinklers come on every night. And it's August. I mean, every deer in the country, it's like an oasis, is going to come there. So where's the best place to hunt if you're a lion? Get up on that porch. And you can do the quick 2 bounds and have that deer nailed, and then you can cache him under the porch. I get a lot of calls like that. Again, sheep, pretty vulnerable. And chickens. Now, turkeys, geese. Lions spend a lot of time hunting wild turkeys. So where we see some of our worst conflicts continual are where we have a lot of wild turkeys and we have people feeding wild turkeys. You know, the lions just come in every night to hunt those turkeys. They know what where the roosting tree is. And if your house is the roosting tree, you can bet every lion in the country knows it and is going to be skulking around your place, you know, trying to get a turkey. Salt licks. Boy, if you want lions and you want predators, throw up a couple salt licks. I mean, I've gone to these places where they're like, you get this dang lion out of here. You know, get up there and the backyard, 15 deer go flying off. You know, you walk over there and there's a big salt lick, and around the salt lick is moose poop and elk poop. You know, and you start following these game trails out in every direction, and they come from every ridge. Every trail in the country comes to their house, you know, and it's because of that salt. And you know, usually the first thing I do is grab the salt blocks, but, you know, that salt stays in the soil forever. And so once you start salting, you've created a bar or a rest stop for every bit of wildlife coming through that country. And so we do get a lot of chickens, you know, preyed on by lions, because I think of that, you know, they're like, hey, there's a white turkey, you know, a little smaller. Again, you know, the irrigation attracts the deer, the elk, just the sprinklers on the lawn. So this just this is just from 2012, but our highest conflicts are usually in August and September, the very, very driest periods. And the reason is because of that sprinkling. You know, we've got these houses with these lush, beautiful green lawns, and you've got all the deer coming in, and as a result, all these sort of subadults and all these older cats, you know, that should be up in the mountains at 7,000 feet chasing these mule deer and mountain goats and bighorn sheep are like, no, I'm going down the valley floor where you've got easy pickings on whitetail. And so that's a direct correlation to dryness and irrigation. In the winter months, you know, all our elk, all our mule deer, you know, come down and join the valley floor whitetail. So come winter, you know, all the game comes down low onto the winter ranges, and all those lions that hunt them come down too. So in the winter months, you have all the lions right down in the lower elevations. And so, you know, you'll get, if you've got a nice house up some mule deer winter range, you're going to have lots and lots of lion activity. Just if you have a house that happens to be where 2-3 draws come together and a couple creeks come together, a couple old skid roads come together, you're going to be at one of these lion crossings, you know, where every night you've got a couple different cats coming past your place. So electric fence, great tool. This just gives you an idea, you know, broke Region 2 up into these areas: the Missoula Valley, the Bitterroot Valley, Blackfoot Valley, Lower Clark Fork, and Upper Clark Fork. You can see, you know, most of our conflicts occur right here around the Missoula Valley floor. And that's just because, you know, the way Missoula is this big fracture zone in the middle of about 7 mountain ranges that come together, you know, 5 valleys come together, all sorts of incredible habitats come together. You got this urban wildlife habitat, and so we've got a lot of lions here. We've got a special management zone where we hunt the heck out of these lions too, and it doesn't seem to make a bit of difference. All it does is create a void where more lions move in. You know, the Upper Clark Fork, a lot of grassland, a lot of lodgepole, not as good a mountain lion habitat. And here's just kind of how, you know, it got broke up. You know, 91 reports of just lions in and around the urban interface near houses. You know, pretty high. And then, you know, domestic fowl, 47 incidents. House cats, 25. You know, goats, sheep, So they're a pretty good predator. But if you really want to have some lions, get some chickens and a salt lick and water your lawn a lot in August.
Any attacks on humans?
You know, we've had a few incidents. We had a little boy killed up at Everill Hill. We had a boy attacked just out of Marshall Canyon here. You know, we get incidents with hunters every year. The ones that we're really concerned about are these young cats that have just left their mother, and they're hunting this sort of urban wildlands interface, and they're starting to hunt house cats. They're a little lean, a little hungry. We had one that jumped a deer decoy. This guy was, you know, shooting the target, went in, get a sip of coffee, and came out, and the target was gone. And so he walks out there, and there's a drag trail, and he goes off in the woods, and here's his his styrofoam decoy cached under a bunch of debris. Well, you know, the little cat wasn't really doing anything, but we removed him right away because, you know, it just, yeah. So people get killed by lions once in a while, and hurt by lions. So we try our best to monitor the situation. We cut them slack, you know. They got to maneuver around humans somehow, but we just don't want them setting up shop right in amongst us.
Is there anything you can use as a, I don't know, how to get them to move out of an area?
Well, most people are pretty good at having them move into an area. I've got a cabin in a real remote site, and you know, I've got a little girl that's 14 now, but you know, I have a pretty good electric fence around my cabin. It's aesthetically pleasing, you know. It's on when needed. When I'm not there, I leave it on. A lot of places, like there's a couple places up in the head of Grant Creek, where, you know, old skid road coming down out of the mountains, right by the creek, a bench, house on the bench, beautiful backyard, swing set. Where does the swing set sit? Right where the skid trail comes out of the mouth of the woods. And every lion and every bear in the country, when they follow that skid road down, it's the first house they hit right at the swing set. You know, and they were just like freaking out, or daily, you know, bears and lions were through the yard, and they had little kids. So they set up an electric fence system and made a little path, you know, where they diverted the trails to the creek, you know, and where they went around the place and followed the bench. So if you're in a real wild area that's got you know, it's a game pocket, electric fence works pretty great, you know, where it's board or pole or something on the inside where the dogs and the kids can't touch it, but on the outside it's hot. And what I like about it is you can be as sloppy as you want to be. You can have your garbage inside your fenced off area, you can have your apple trees, your chickens, your barbecue, and it's all contained. And anything that does try to come in to test, you know, get a taste, get shocked, you know, and they teach themselves not to go. So that's one.
How tall should the fence be?
You know,
Should you have the electric?
Just a good 4-foot fence. And right now they say, you know, alternating hot ground 7 on the outside. But I've seen shorter fences. I've seen jackleg fences where the hot wires are on the outside, you know, where the poles aren't. You can make them look pretty good, but I like it because I don't have to, it's a pain in the hind end, putting the garbage in the garage every night, or pushing the barbecue back in, or picking all the wind-blown apples, you know, and just having a nice little fence off the back porch where the kids and the dog and the cat and the chickens and apple trees and your garden is, you know, and it's all just sort of contained, and anything that does try to get in there gets a good shock and teaches itself not to do it. I think that's a good foolproof method. But the big one is just not to have the goodies.
So what about just hiking around that wonderful Grant Creek territory, and your back door, and you're just going out there? you get your standard, look big and all that kind of stuff. Do you use bear spray and what do you do? And yeah.
Yeah, bear spray, I carry bear spray all the time, especially when I'm in Reno Park, Tom Green, Bugby Park. There's a lot of black bear and a lot of lion that hang out in the rattlesnake riparian area. But I'd never go anywhere without a can of bear spray. And it does drive me batty. Like you'll see the kids going on day hikes, from the preschools, playing down by the creek, and I do beat that drum like, you must have an adult with you, you must carry bear spray.
And so if you're just beyond just sort of the little local, if you're out hunting or hiking, and when mountain lions up, it says, well, they're going to attack you from the back, they're going to grab your neck and you won't even know what's going on.
Yeah, there's lots of theories out there. Like I spent a lot of time out hiking in the woods, and I have spent a lot of time pursuing lions, and my first instinct when I see a lion is I try to get him up a tree. Like scream and yell and run at him and get him up a tree. I'll take a couple pictures, and I just instinctively do that all the time. But it is worrisome because I see people in the rattlesnake, right at dusk, 5 in the morning, the middle of the summer, where it's hot, jogging with earphones on, just oblivious to the fact that they're going through little groups of deer, and where there's mountain lions hunting. Always assume that there's prey around and not to be mimicking a prey species. But if you carry bear spray and you just are always really tuned into what's going on around you, you're usually A-okay. Only weird times I've had with lions are, when they're right in the middle of hunting deer and all of a sudden I'm there and they're like, are you a deer? Or with a female with kittens, or when they're protecting a carcass. Like they aren't defensive over their carcass, but they sure as heck aren't going to leave the carcass. And they'll try to push coyotes off their carcasses. So a lot of times when people encounter a lion, it's because they've got a kill right there. Or kittens. A lot of times, like these cats that come up to people and hiss and walk around them, a lot of times you'll find where there's newborn kittens in the culvert, right where it occurred. So I think the big one is just always realizing how wild it is, especially around the Missoula area. But, I wouldn't worry, but I'd be prepared.
One more question?
Yeah.
Heard recently that a lot of what's happening, all this urban interface stuff that you've been saying, but there's a lot more lions changing the habitat than there are bears or wolves. Would you agree with that?
Well,
Especially elk and deer.
the lions go through pretty big cycles, and they're usually tuned into the deer cycles. And what usually happens is you'll have gobs of deer, hard winter, and the cycle of the lion's always a little bit behind. So you'll have the big hard winter where they're all winter killed, and that winter, easy pickings. But then the next summer, not as many deer, but a lot of lions, and you'll get a lot of subadults that are kind of having a tough go of it. Not very good hunters, can't find the game, and that's when things get kind of weird, where you have a lot of these sort of subadult cats that are half starved to death, coming down, hunting house cats and in and amongst communities. Our urban wildlife is what's driving it all. It's just everyone likes to blame the wolves and the predators, but really what it is we've created a big pile of ice cream and butter where we live. And why bother to live in the mountains when you can bathe in milk every night and live the good life, And it is, I mean, half of our elk and deer anymore are addicted to irrigated lawns and clover and alfalfa, and I mean, it's just such great food. And it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse.
In India, they wear, when they're out in the woods, they wear hats that have eyes on the back. Has anybody ever?
Yeah, people, I actually, for a while there at Down Sports and Surplus, they had a baseball hat with 2 eyeballs on the back, you know.
Does that work?
You know, let's just say I got one for Christmas and I put it somewhere deep in the trunk where, you know, I didn't want to show. It's kind of like, well, when you go riding horses, do you want to wear one of the pretend hard hats that looks like a cowboy hat, you know? Well, it's a choice, but, you know, I could see where it would work,
It
you know?
does work in India.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have a question about the possibility of reintroduction of grizzly bears in the Bitterroot Selway. What's the likelihood of that happening?
Well, you know, they tried it once and they were all ready for it, and the governor axed it. So there is talk of trying to do it again, but you know, they're slowly creeping that way anyways, and
They're going to reestablish anyway?
yeah, they're you know, give them 10 years, they'll be there anyways, you know. So to me, it makes no sense to spend a small fortune, and you know, they'll get there. They're slowly creeping south. That's just my opinion. You know, with the wolves too, the whole wolf reintroduction thing, you know, I mean, the wolves were coming down on their own. We didn't need to do the wolf reintroduction, you know. Look at the huge mess that's created. I mean, they were showing up on their own. Well,
Do bears den up in the same place? Like, I'm thinking particularly black bears, but the grizzlies as well? Is it?
They seem to.
Do they go back to the same den?
yeah, they seem to. You know, like we've had one bear just near my property up the Blackfoot that's den the same spot every year, and her mother den there, and her father den there. And you can just, you know, when you go up to the den site, you'll see all these other old caved-in den sites where, you know, they just go to the same spot every year. Other bears go to a different spot, like Ethel. I mean, she den wherever she found herself. So, yeah, a lot of, you'll see variation, but it seems like if you find a good spot to den, I mean, you go back there every year. And then these black bears, you know, that den in Greeno Park, I mean, they go to the same culvert and the same cottonwood every year, you know.